starting at verse 2. The only letter of recommendation we need is you yourselves. Your lives are a better letter written in our hearts. Everyone can read it and recognize our good work among you. Here it is. Clearly, you are a letter from Christ showing the result of our ministry among you. This letter is written not with pen and ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. It is carved not on tablets of stone, but on human hearts. Look at your neighbor and tell them what you see is what he's done. What you see is what he's done. You may all be seated in the presence of God. What you see is what he's done. There was a story about a young man talking about how he came into faith. And Tasha, he said, I never read the Bible growing up. We had one in our house, but it was just on the shelf, Fred, unopened, collecting dust. And Tasha, but then he met a Christian who was kind to me, and I didn't deserve it. And Lisa, he said, who forgave me when I wronged him, who walked with a peace that didn't make sense. And Sister Telly said, I thought to myself, if that's what Jesus does, I need him in my life. The man went on to say, the truth is, I didn't read the Bible at first, but I read him. His life was the only Bible that I needed at the time, because it was the only Bible that I had. And through him, I finally opened the pages of Scripture and I gave my life to Christ. I have a question to ask you. Is that the same testimony someone would say as they interacted with you? Are you kind to people when they don't deserve it? Do you forgive people when they have wronged you? Do you walk in the peace that surpasses all understanding? I said, when folk look at you, what vibe do you give? Do they see the God in you, or do they see a you that does not represent him? Are you a catalyst for Christ or a contradiction of the kingdom? When folks see you, when folk interact with you, do they see a light? Or Lauren, do they see doom and gloom? When people talk to others about you, what does this statement mean? Listen to me. When people talk to others about you, what does this statement mean? They always have something to say. Baby, that's a blanket statement that can go multiple ways. Are you giving a sour taste when people say that? Or are you giving an old taste and see that the Lord is good when folks say that? See, the man in the illustration said the person he interacted with displayed the love of Christ. It displayed the thoughtfulness and the awesomeness of Christ. I need you to ask you a question one more time in its most simplistic form. Do people see Christ when they see you? Are you a depiction? Are you a model of who the Apostle Paul is talking about in our focal text this morning? Paul says that people ought to recognize the good work when they see you. Here's the backdrop. In Corinth, traveling teachers often carried letters of recommendation to prove their credibility. Critics of Paul questioned his authority because he didn't bring formal commendations. Paul responds by saying, I don't need letters. You are my letter. The proof of ministry was transformed lives. Look, I want you to understand, when people see you, they ought to know there is something special and unique about you. There's a saying that goes, the proof is in the pudding. I like to share this, customized just for you. The proof is the God in you. Your witness should be your aura, not your proclamation, not your performance, not your position, but it is your presence. When you walk in the room, people ought to walk in. When you walk in the room, peace ought to walk in with you. When you show up, love ought to show up with you. When you step out, light ought to step out with you. Because real evidence of your faith isn't how loud you shout. It's how well you shine. And since Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, 2 and 3, that you are a letter from Christ, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. Let me ask you this. If your life is a letter, what gospel are people reading when they read you? Don't get quiet on me now. Because if people are reading you before they ever read the Bible, then your life ought to preach in 3 clear ways. Number 1, your life ought to preach that your condition doesn't cancel your calling. Teresa, look at verse 2. The only letter of recommendation we need is you yourselves. Your lives are a letter written in our hearts, and everyone can read it and recognize our good work among you. Paul says the Corinthians themselves were the evidence of his ministry. Even though they came from broken, messy backgrounds. You can read more about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9 through 11. Their condition didn't cancel their credibility. In fact, their change became their clearest credential. Don't disqualify yourself because of your past, because God writes his story on broken pages. When people see your letter, they may not know your story, but they ought to see your testimony. When people read you, they ought to see that despite how the enemy tried to take you out, it did not work, because the God in you is greater than the mess that tried to destroy you. Your Bible says that greater is he that is in me. And baby, the he that is in me is able to keep me from falling, is able to present me faultless, is able to make my wrongs right, is able to pick me up and turn me around. Is there anybody here who can testify that although you may not know my story, you can see him in me? You may not know my journey, but you can see him in me. You may not know how I almost lost my mind, but you see him in me. I said, is there anybody here who can testify that your condition doesn't cancel your calling? Go ahead and stare at your neighbor for a second. Stare at your neighbor for a second. Now say, I see you. See, so your life, Rick and Deborah were looking at each other like they loved each other. Your life ought to preach that your condition doesn't cancel your calling, but it also must preach that your confession can create a chain reaction. Look at the 8th portion of verse 3. Clearly, you are a letter from Christ, showing the result of our ministry among you. The Corinthians' very existence as transformed believers was a confession of God's power. Their lives spoke louder than any letter of recommendation. Like the Samaritan woman in John 4. Their testimony sparked a chain reaction. One honest confession. Look at what he has done in me can set off revival for someone else. The woman in John 4 articulated it. She spoke it. But what if I told you that your body posture can set it off for somebody else? What if I told you that your past cannot measure up to God's present power working in you? What if I told you that your mistakes can't outweigh his mercy that keeps on covering you? What if I told you that your shortcomings cannot silence the spirit that is still speaking through you? Because sometimes it's not the eloquence of your words, it's the evidence of your walk. It's not the perfection of your past, it's the persistence of your praise. It's not the strength of your resume, baby, but it's the signature of your Redeemer written on your life. And when people see that, when they see you walking with joy in the midst of sorrow, when they see you forgiving in the face of offense, when they see you holding on to hope when everything around you says quit, that's when your confession becomes contagious. That's when your letter speaks louder than your words. That's when folk say, I need what they have. That's when folks say, whatever you are carrying, I need to carry it too. Your aura ought to preach, and it ought to cause a chain reaction. If it happened for you, it ought to happen for somebody else. And if it happens for somebody else, then it ought to happen for somebody else. Your witness ought to cause a trajectory shift for others. Your witness ought to create a legacy of people becoming fishers of men and women. Your witness ought to declare, I may not look like what I went through, baby, but I'm living proof that God can do what he can do, what he said do, what he's going to do in my life. I may have scars, but my scars tell a story. I may have wounds, but my wounds are now witnesses. I may have a past, but my past has been redeemed by his presence. So when people see me, they just don't see me. They see the God who kept me, the Christ who saved me, and the Spirit who empowers me. Your letter has to preach and cause a chain reaction. Go ahead and stare at that neighbor again. Stare at that neighbor again. Stand for a second and say, I see you. I see you. So your life ought to preach that your condition doesn't cancel your calling. It also must preach that your confession can create a chain reaction. Lastly, your life ought to preach that your conversion can cause a community shift. Look at the B portion of verse 3. This letter is not written with pen and ink, but with the Spirit of the living God. It is carved not on tablets of stone, but on human hearts. When the Spirit writes on your heart, it doesn't just change you. It impacts those who read your life. Just as the Corinthians became Paul's letter to the world, your conversion, Sister Taylor, becomes the gospel somebody else will encounter. Baby, your story isn't just personal. Sister Doris, your story is prophetic. Your transformed life is a seed that can shift your family, your neighborhood, and your community. Your letter ought to say, if God can do it for me, he can do it for you. If God can turn my life around, he can turn your life around. If God can fulfill his promise for me, he can fulfill his promise for you. Your visible witness ought to cause you to be the change agent for the kingdom. You carry an invisible tattoo that reads, property of Jesus Christ. Stamped with his blood, sealed by his Spirit, secured by his promise. So everywhere you go, the world ought to know who you belong to. Every room you step into, heaven's mark is on you. Every conversation you have, his grace is showing through you. Because when God writes his name on your life, you just don't blend in, baby. You stand out as living proof that the gospel is still alive and the gospel is still well. Is there anybody here that can testify? I am not defined by my weakness, but I am defined by his workmanship. Is there anybody here that can testify that I'm not defined by my failures, but I'm defined by his faithfulness? I said, is there anybody here that can testify that I'm not defined by my scars, but I'm defined by his stripes? Is there anybody here that can testify that I'm not defined by my history, but I'm defined by his hope? Is there anybody here that can testify about hope? The psalmist says, my hope is built. Yo, help me pick this thing on nothing less than Jesus' blood and his righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name, on Christ, the solid rock I stand. All of the ground is seeking sand. That's why I can walk with confidence. That's why I can speak with boldness. That's why I can witness with power. Because when people read my life, they just don't see me, but they see the God who is still writing his story through me. I need to leave you with this. You are not defined by your weakness. You are defined by his strength. You are not defined by your failures. You are defined by his faithfulness. You are not defined by your past. You are defined by his purpose. Every step you take, every room you enter, every conversation you hold, you carry evidence that the gospel is still alive in your life. Because when God stamps his seal on your soul, you just don't blend in, but you stand out. You stand out as living proof that he saves, living proof that he redeems, living proof that he still takes broken vessels and turns them into bold horses. And somebody here knows, if you would just think back over your life, you wouldn't need a choir, you wouldn't need an organ, you wouldn't need a preacher, because your own testimony is enough to shout on. Think about the pit he pulled you from. Think about the doors he opened when every sign said close. Think about the grace that carried you when guilt tried to chain you down. Think about the peace he gave you when storms were raging all around you. Think about the way he kept you, covered you, and called you. That's why you can't be quiet. That's why you can't sit still. That's why you can't shut your mouth. Because when you know what is done in your life, when you feel what he's given, when you know how far he's brought you from, you just got to testify. When I look back over my life and I think things are over, I understand that all of my good days outweigh my bad days. And baby, I won't complain because I'm still here. I could have been gone, but I'm still here. I could have lost it all, but I'm still here. I could have been broken, but I'm still here. I could have been defeated, but I'm still here. I could have doubted myself, but I'm still here. I could have given up, but I'm still here. And that's why I celebrate every breath, every smile, every moment, because being here means I've been given another chance to rise, another chance to love, another chance to make my mark. And hear me, baby, your life is the letter, your walk is the witness, your glow is the gospel in action. So go on and let your light so shine. Let it shine in your house. Let it shine on your job. Let it shine in your school. Let it shine in these streets and let the world know, baby, I've been changed. I've been redeemed. I've been set free because this Jesus, he's too good good for me to be quiet. He's too strong for me to be silent about. He's too faithful to be hidden. So I'll say it until my last breath. He saved me. He raised me. He kept me. He healed me. And he walks with me. The psalmist says, and he walks with me. And he talks with me. And he tells me that I am his own. And the joy that we share as we carry there, none will ever know. And since I know what he's done for me, I got one declaration before I get ready for Super Bowl, for football Sunday. The walk is worth it. The life is proof of it. And Jesus is the reason for it. Because just like Paul said in our text, we are living letters, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of God. Our lives, our testimonies, our very being show the world who he is. And if my life can testify of his witness, his love and his power, then I'll let it shout loud, I am his. And he has glorified in me. Go ahead and look at your neighbor one more time and say, I see you. And what you see is what he gets. Come on, put your hands together for our Lord.